Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Hey, y'all. You are in for a treat today. You get to hear from my dearest friend, Bear Hébert. Bear, if you are watching the video, you can already tell that Bear and I are unlikely mates. That if you knew us on the surface, you would be like, these people are not, one of these things is not like the other. And yet, I met Bear, and we can tell this story a little bit later maybe. I met Bear in my first yoga teacher training, and that was the beginning of a really extraordinary connection and friendship, and I have been so grateful to know and learn from Bear over the years. Bear is about to launch the Anti-Capitalist Business School.
True story.
Which I had to clarify to somebody else the other day is not anti-commerce.
True.
Nor is it anti-profit necessarily.
Also true.
It's just anti-capitalist. Yep. And I just feel so grateful to have learned so much about how we can move in the world with more authenticity and more kindness in action. And that is really, and also just so much emotional skill. So I hope your cheeks are getting red, and I am just so excited. Is there anything that you want to share before we get started, before we dive in?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, except that before I got on this call, I was like, I should bring some Kleenex to this podcast interview because I might cry. And I already almost cried while you were just talking about how we met. So I don't know what we're in for today.
I think there might be a lot of that on both sides for us. For context for our listeners, we are making this recording the day before the 20th anniversary of the thing. And so I think a lot of that is really right up on the surface. So
definitely.
Bear Hébert, tell me about your family growing up and what, especially as it related to any kind of spiritual or religious practice.
Yeah. I did not grow up religious. I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana. I'm from small city, South Louisiana, very sort of steeped in a kind of cultural Catholicism. But my mom, had gone to Catholic school, was very religious, and then left the church when she was an adult. And so I didn't grow up kind of in a very religious environment, but Christianity was kind of all around me. My grandparents went to church every week. My aunts and uncles went to church every week. So I sort of went to church sometimes with some people. But I didn't have a consistent kind of religious upbringing for most of my childhood. And I mean, honestly, I really yearned for it. My family was a pretty dysfunctional family. There was a lot of trauma, violence, just, all the high on the ACEs score, kind of list of things. And so I really, as a kid, I remember asking my mom, Mom, why don't we go to church? Can we go to church? I want to go to church. And I really yearned for some kind of connection to something larger, something bigger than what was happening in my family. And my parents were just like, what? No. Who is this child? And what? Yeah.
Yeah, it also makes sense to me that inside of that environment, you might have, the church was orderly and calm,
predictable,
maybe, and predictable, and maybe even a little peaceful. And so, like, yeah, that's also like that little kid longing for some safety and place for their nervous system to
Yeah,
unwind.
totally, totally. And so, but I think also I like the thing I remember is not specifically that. Like the thing when I think about myself being like, I want to go to church, like the thing I wanted was like a daddy. I don't know.
That
Like,
makes sense. Yeah, Sky Daddy,
yeah. I was
100%
like,
Sky
but what
Daddy.
about, is there like someone who will just like love me, please? Like, and so like that yearning, I think was really awake and alive in me when I was young. And then, yeah, I got into middle school, and one of my good friends had kind of grown up going to a very evangelical Baptist church. And she was like, you should come to youth group with me. It's super fun. And so I started going to youth group. And then I was like, oh, there is someone who loves me, and his name is Jesus, And like, I, and I was so deeply hungry for that kind of connection and that kind of, the idea that there was something larger was predictable, that did make sense, and that was a source of love and connection. That I got really into church, in the way that I think people, in that like adolescent age range, take any of their interest and make it their entire identity. So I got,
I guess I didn't realize that that wasn't because that was not driven from your family.
no,
That was you.
yeah, that was me. Yeah. Yeah. So like I went to church all through middle school, seventh, eighth, ninth grade, kind of on my own. And I was like desperately trying to convert my family to be Christians with me, because like, then I had sort of like steeped in that. I know, it's so funny.
I love it. Well, no, because I'm thinking about like coming home in like fifth or sixth grade and telling my parents that we had to start recycling,
Oh yeah, right.
right?
Yes.
That like we had like this, and like now I think about like a 12 and a 13-year-old, and I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, how that lands.
I mean
It's like, oh, okay, honey, sure, we'll go to
the
church.
religious
Great.
fervor of like, a 13-year-old is really something. Yeah, I like, man, okay, here's some real like very specific personal story stuff. One of my tactics to try to convert my mom was that I started writing Bible verses on little slips of paper, and then I would leave them in her coffee cup in the cabinet, like the empty coffee cup. I would like put a little Bible verse in the coffee cup every morning, because my mom worked nights,
Did,
and so I like left the house before she did. And so I would like get up and get myself ready, leave the house and go to school. And like in the morning, getting myself ready, I would leave her a little note from Jesus in her coffee mug. She never said anything about it.
part of me is like, can you imagine the first morning that happens, where you're like, you're just waking up and trying to pick coffee, and you're like, what is this thing in my? Oh,
Yeah. Okay. So I was very religious. I went to like a, non-denominational. I had gone to that Baptist church with my friend to begin with. And then I found a different church that I liked that was like, even more weird, and was, very like, the lights are dim. We're like singing with our hands raised kind of,
yeah, yeah, sort of
place.
like new Christian kind of with a rock band.
Yes, with a rock band with like a
Yeah,
hot drummer. Yeah, totally.
yeah, of course. Yes.
And that, okay, and so then anyway, this is like a whole crazy story from my life, but like basically then separately but simultaneously my mom became religious, but it wasn't because I left her like Jesus fortune cookies slips in her coffee mugs. It was because her best friend was married to a guy who had been raised in the Pentecostal church, and he had like left the church as an adult, and then he and his wife were like having really hard times. They had money struggles. He was addicted to gambling. They both had drug and alcohol problems, like all these kinds of things going on in their life that were real, seemingly insurmountable challenges. And then he went back to the church that he had grown up in, and was, newly religious again. And he like reconverted back to Pentecostalism. He, his wife also then converted, having never been part of that church. And then their lives like dramatically changed for the better. They got sober. He got a job. They had money, like all the stuff that had been kind
Mm.
of happening for them resolved. And my
And so
mom,
from the outside, that probably looked really
very
miraculous.
miraculous to my mom, and she was like, wow, like if this is what Jesus is doing for people, I would like some of that. And so she started going to Pentecostal church. And so then there was like this long series of years. That was when I was in ninth grade. And so then, like, the rest of my high school experience was basically this doctrinal um, battle between me and my mother, because Pentecostals believe different things than non-denominational Christians,
Right.
and the Pentecostals didn't believe that I was like saved, didn't believe that I was like going to heaven. Anyway, this is like deep details about my traumatic religious upbringing, but like this is
But it feels relevant. Like this is relevant. Like it's the reason that I start here because everybody's experience with a sense of spiritual life is very
yeah,
different. It's absolutely influenced by some, right? It's influenced by our socioeconomic status and the educational access of our family. It's like all of that stuff that weaves in, and it absolutely sets the stage for like what comes
yeah,
next.
yeah. And so, you know, the church I went to was certainly conservative, but it wasn't conservative to the degree that the church that my mom went to was. Like, that church is um, has very repressive ideas about women, has very repressive ideas about sexuality, has very repressive ideas about parenting. And
Hmm.
so my mom was, in in deep, and still is, 30 years later. Uh and so there was this like friction between us that really was, I mean, part of it was just like power struggle between teenager and parent, but like some of it for me was like truly a deep spiritual struggle and a real crisis of faith, because at that point I was like, 4 years into my own personal relationship with Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. And then all of the, and one of the like basic tenets of, being a teenager in a Christian setting is to like honor your parents and to like do what they say. And so then all of a sudden my mom was saying, you have to come to church with me, you're not allowed to wear pants, you have to stop cutting your hair, you can't wear makeup, you can't wear jewelry, also you're going,
No dancing,
yeah, no
right?
dancing, no secular music, just like all the things, right?
Yeah.
But like also you're going to hell if you don't do these things. And so, I felt like I had already been through this process of spiritual redemption, had like turned my life over to God, and then all of a sudden to have the other main power figure in my life, my mother, say, actually all the stuff you thought you were doing that was right is wrong. All the ways you thought
Yeah.
you were in connection to God and spirit are not true,
Yeah, are going to send you to hell.
are literally going to like subject you
Condemn you to eternal
it's
dynamic
eternal
damnation.
damnation. Exactly. And it was, I mean, it was utterly shattering to me as a teenager, because I was like, what do I do? Do I follow what I know, what I felt like I have known, what I have had a somatic experience of knowing as connection to God and to spirit and to, you know, um, something bigger than me? Yeah,
Jesus.
through
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Or do I do what my mom says, which is also what God tells me to do? Right? Like, God is like, do what your parents tell you. So like, do I do that, which is like counter to the thing that I've been thinking was the right thing to do? And like, ultimately, it was, that was the fault. There were many things that led me to like leaving Christianity, but like that friction is the thing that did it for me. That it was like, oh, okay, I actually, like, if what I really deeply believe to be true isn't true, maybe none of this is true.
Right.
It was like the chink in the armor, it was the crack in my faith, and I was just like, oh no. And I mean, I like so deeply grieved that without having the words to describe that at the time, but like I so deeply grieved the loss of that connection and of that sort of like steadfastness. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like that has sort of, yeah, set the pathway for, you know, a lifetime of a less dogmatic, less prescriptive, less you know, controlling relationship to God, relationship to spirit, and relationship to myself, you know. Um,
Yeah.
that I, you know, that ultimately I was like, okay, now, you know, now I'm. Anyway, the stories of like how I actually left the church are pretty funny because then I was like pretending that I was still going to Pentecostal church when I wasn't. I was like secretly wearing pants at boarding school that was, you know, forbidden. I had like
Right. I was
secret
going to say, right, because that was like you went to boarding school as like at the same moment that
all
all
of
of
this
that
was
is happening.
happening
All of that
totally.
fracture is
Yeah,
happening.
right.
Yeah.
So I had like secret jeans that like lived in my, you know, in my dresser at boarding school that I like couldn't bring home with me. You know, and then his
Secret
sacred
genes.
jeans. Yeah, secret blue jeans.
I mean, as teenage rebellion goes, having secret genes are that's pretty raucous, Bear. Pretty
Yeah,
pretty
I was
wild.
wild. I was totally wild. I mean, you know, and then as soon as I graduated high school, I was like, I'm out of here, suckers. Like, you know, and I like,
Yeah.
I lost my virginity. Not that I even believe in that concept, but, you know, like I started having sex, I started drinking, I started smoking pot, I got a boyfriend, I got a girlfriend. Like, I just was like, you know,
All of the
I
ways.
joined like a
Exactly.
communist anti-war organization. I just really went all in on
Yeah. You
living a
went
different
all
life.
the way
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I love it. Okay, so and there might be some stories along the way, but like when you think about your spiritual life now, what does it look like?
Man, you know, I got the questions for this podcast however long ago, 10 days ago or something, and I've been like contemplating them since then, and I have just been sort of stumped by this question. Like I'm like, I don't know, what is a spiritual life? Like what does that mean?
Right? I don't know. That's part of the reason the podcast feels so important.
Yeah. It's like what is it? Yeah. And I don't, you know, for I could tell some more of the story of my adulthood and sort of the way that like my yoga practice was a real, you know, the part of it, like you already said, we met at yoga teacher training. It was your first training and my second yoga teacher training. So I was already like in deep, had been, you know, and also the,
Yeah.
you know, the Katrina through line is like I started going to yoga classes when I moved back after being evacuated for 9 months. That was like I came.
Is that when you started
Yeah,
practicing?
at Wild Lotus, came back, started going to class. I went to Sean's class, went to class with Nicole, went to Laura Flora's class, like just like old,
Yeah.
you know, summer of 2006 in New Orleans, like
Yeah.
at the Uptown
Yeah.
studio. And just like, yeah, so, you know, that was kind of the arc of my spiritual practice for like 13 years, um,
Yeah.
12 years.
Well, and I think about this notion, especially like after Katrina. It was such a wild and bizarre time because everything was uncertain.
Totally.
And there was, I mean, you go back to that sense of like lots of chaos, lots of confusion, you know, nothing's
Yeah.
predictable, nothing's guaranteed,
Yeah.
right? Sounds familiar.
Very familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Katrina
And
happened when I was 21. 22. I was not yet. I was like just not quite 22. So I was like just barely an adult. So I had
yeah.
been through like all of this, like the perpetual uncertainty of my childhood. And then I was like, cool, now I can make my own life that is like, has some stability and has some certainty. And then the universe was like, ha, I gotcha. Like,
No, no, you
how about
can't.
a major natural disaster and failure of the state that's going to fuck up your life for the next 20 years? Cool.
Yeah, that'll be
Yeah,
fun. Exactly. I mean, and you know that Katrina is such an essential part of my spiritual story
totally.
because my family home, right, as a kid, it was like predictable, pretty
Yeah.
much. You know, I mean, certainly had its own issues the way that everybody's childhood does. But like, you know, my parents were married most of my childhood and we ate dinner together as a family every night. You know, it's like very sort of not exactly Norman Rockwell, but like
Yeah.
predictable, right? Safe at home. And so this like massive disruption in everything I believed was true about the world, right? Like the government works,
And
right? And like that's
and wants to
and
protect
is
us.
effective.
Yes.
And yes, and is like and is prioritizing our everyone's well-being. And that because also, I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but not much, right? I was
Right.
25, and so I had been, living on my own for a couple years, and but I still was very connected to my parents, and this feeling of like, oh shit, my parents can't make everything
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Whereas probably up until that moment, 90% of the time, my parents could make everything okay.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh, it was like the kind of like the ground opened
Yeah.
up. Yeah. And so like in this moment of like tremendous
Totally.
disorientation, I was like, is there a sky daddy? I need a sky daddy.
No, there isn't, but there's this yoga class that you could go to. It's on Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock at this place called Wild Lotus Yoga. I mean, it truly saved my life. I know people always say that, about things, but like, yeah, just having a place to go and be like, this is a place where you can be in your body. This is a place where you can cry. This is a place where like people understand
Yeah.
how you're feeling and what you're dealing
Yeah.
with.
And it's always the same time. It's at the same place. The people who are guiding it are, at least for that moment, appear to be settled in their nervous
Yeah.
systems. Right now we look back at we actually just had this beautiful conversation at Wild Lotus this weekend amongst the teachers about trauma informed
Cool.
practice. That was very cool. But one of the things about it that were interesting is that the essence of vinyasa practice, right, is that it is rhythmic
Mm.
and like reliable, and the movement with the breath, that like slow, that like steady movement, and literally the rhythmic nature of a class is in and of itself soothing to the nervous
Totally.
system, because a nervous system that's in traumatic experience is like out of sync,
Right.
right? It's like you can't quite.
Yeah.
And so just, so yeah, it's like, and I mean, I did have like little reveries with Sky Daddy, but yeah, I mean, I think I started looking in that moment. I was like, okay, something else has to happen
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
So it's interesting because there is a parallel that I see between when you left the church and also when you left yoga. Do you want to talk about
Sure.
it?
Yeah. I love to just like burn it all down and leave it all behind. Um,
Well, no, it's not. I don't
no,
necessarily think of
no.
it that way.
I
I think of it as
totally,
like,
yeah,
right,
joking, but yes.
but like, we know better, we do better,
Totally. Yeah.
right? Like that like as we grow and get more refined in our own integrity,
Yeah.
how we spend our time and lives change.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So for people who don't know, people who are listening who don't know this story, basically, like I started practicing yoga in 2006. I became a yoga teacher in 2009 and then taught yoga from 2009 till 2018. And over the course of those last few years of teaching, I started to become more and more uncomfortable with the cognitive dissonance that I was feeling, like as a white person teaching a practice that uh, does not come from white people. And as my own kind of like racial consciousness was growing, um, I just kept hearing from more and more people, people of color, people of Asian descent, that they were so perturbed by sort of the way that whiteness had colonized yoga and yoga spaces. Um, yeah, and so in 2018, I made the very difficult and sort of dramatic decision to leave the practice and leave my position as a yoga teacher. And I not to like, toot my own horn too much or something, but I was like I was a teacher in a community that like really valued me and my teaching and what I did. And I had like a dedicated student base who were, people who came to my class twice a week, every week for years. people who didn't like to go to other people, were like, I don't ever want to go to
Yeah.
anybody else's classes but yours, like, and so I had a real devoted community of practitioners that I was part of and that I was the teacher of. And so it was a really
Yeah.
big deal to leave that. And I tried to do that with as much, like, as much grace and as much tending as I could. But yeah, I realized the kind of turning point for me, after all those years of kind of discomfort and like denial and trying to find ways to explain around the discomfort about what I was doing was I read this essay by Ibram Kendi. You've heard me talk about this before, I think, but like I read this essay by Ibram Kendi about like why racism persists. And he says that like people think that racism persists because of ignorance or hatred. But if it was ignorance or hatred that was the problem, then education and love would solve racism. But like education and love
That hasn't
do
happened
not
yet.
solve racism, it turns out. And so, he posits that like the root of the persistence of racism and white supremacy in our culture is self-interest, and that like the reason that white supremacy continues doing what it's doing is because it's in our self-interest to do that. And when I read that, it just like clicked all of this into place for me, that I was like, oh, the reason that I have been willing to continue doing this thing that I have thought for a long time might not be in alignment with my own ethics is because it has been in my self-interest to do so. It has paid my
Yeah.
bills. It has like built my community. It has like given me meaningful work to do. Like it has, provided me so much to overlook the way that this is not actually in alignment with the values that I hold and the way that I want to live my life. And so that was the point of no return for me, where I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I actually have to quit. And it felt, it felt both like a long time coming and a very kind of dramatic shift, where it was just like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I've been thinking about this for a long time and suddenly I can't do it anymore. And
Yeah.
so within a few months,
It's
I had stepped back entirely.
and what's so extraordinary to me listening to you tell the story again, because I was with you along the line,
Right. We
right?
were like
And I had,
dear friends and fellow
yeah,
yoga
dear
teachers through
friends,
all of that. Yeah.
but both yoga teachers, and we started coaching at the same time, right? And that was part of what connected us, that we were sort of trying to explore that. And I continue to teach, right? And I mean, and I still teach yoga, and I had friends and colleagues who were like, this must be really hard for you, right? Right? Because I mean, I might find that old
Oh,
essay,
yeah.
if it still
I
exists
can,
on the
I can
internet,
send
and
you the
link it in the
link.
show notes. Great. Because the that essay, I think, did an extraordinary thing in the New Orleans yoga community, that it made every other yoga teacher reevaluate, go like, wait a minute, if this is sort of asks themselves those deep questions. And and so I had other people coming to me, they're like, this must be really hard for you. Like, your best friend is, calling out every white yoga teacher. And I was like, no, we're good. I was like, Bear and I have been talking about this for
Years.
years,
Yeah.
and it didn't come as a surprise to
Right.
me or a shock to me at
Right.
all. But it was also clear in this world, the same way that I have watched you in many other aspects, that you were at the leading edge of that shift, right? That was sort of just at the very beginning of the conversation about white supremacy and colonization, and a really serious conversation about cultural appropriation in yoga in the broader sense. But it was not, I mean, I remember somebody, we won't name names, saying, Bear called me a white supremacist. I'm not a Nazi.
Right.
And I was like,
Right.
oh, right, because like even the
Yeah.
language was not something that many people here had facility with.
Right. Totally. Totally. Yeah. I mean, it was a very, yeah, it was a very impactful decision that I made in my life. And also, and I think like, yeah, did have an impact out in the wider community and like on the internet, you know, and,
Yeah.
but I think like, yeah, some of why it didn't cause a problem in our relationship is because we had been talking about it for years, but some of why it didn't cause a problem in our relationship is because I am so deeply divested from like dogma at this point that I, like, you know, if you read that essay, it tells the story of how I came to make the decision that I made, and then it posits a series of questions. And it's like, if you are a
Yeah.
white yoga teacher, here are questions that you might ask yourself. But it doesn't say, and it says like, and here's how I've answered them for myself, and therefore why I'm making the decision that I'm making. And I know that other white people quit teaching yoga because of that, because it was like the push
Yeah.
that they
They
needed
did.
to be like, I also have felt really uncomfortable, and also quitting feels in alignment with my values, and so I'm gonna, you know, also choose to leave. And I know people like yourself who were like, this is gonna make me think more deeply, you know, and for you it wasn't just that one essay, right? It was like our whole, all the years of conversations we've been having about this stuff, right? And that's, I think, part
Yeah.
of why it wasn't a rift between us, because what's actually important to me is that, like, the thing that I really value is people like consciously critically engaging with their own behavior, their own values, their own practices in the world, and like how those things are impacting themselves, other people, and the wider world around us. And like, if you are deeply considering things and you come to a different set of conclusions than I do, that's fine. Like, we're different people,
Right.
we're living different lives, and like, I don't need for other people to do exactly what I said I'm doing, or to, you know, like, I don't need for other people to like, um
Come to the same conclusion that you have come
no,
to every
both
single
for
time.
themselves and also for me. Like, I feel like part of why people get really obsessed with that kind of dogma is because they don't actually feel secure in their own, you know, their own position and their own integrity and their own kind of grounding. And to me, I'm like, this is so very clear that this is the right thing for me to do for now. And I believe myself that, like, if at some point later I acquire new information or a new perspective or a new set of circumstances, that I might make a different choice, and that would be okay. But like, for now, this is the
Yeah.
exact right thing for me to do, and I feel very stable in that. I feel very secure in that, and I don't need anybody else to like also do that in order to make me feel okay about it, which I think is like, you know, that's like so much of why organized religion is so um distasteful to me at this point, because so much of it actually requires that second thing where it's like, well, how will I, you know, my faith is inherently kind of you know, corroborated by the faith of other people, and my willingness to like do these particular practices is like held up by other people's willingness to also do them. And yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, I think that's also like how and why fascism has arisen in our country. You know, like, I
I
mean, it's
mean,
there.
yeah,
And so,
exactly. And what's interesting is like what I keep thinking is what you described, sort of starting with reading the Ibram Kendi article, is a crisis of faith and a spiritual awakening, honestly. Because to me, a spiritual awakening is the moment when we say, I am willing to choose what is true over what I have been attached to,
yes.
right? I am willing to sacrifice my ego, aka self interest. I'm willing to let go of my job, my profession, my relationships in order to pursue what I feel in my heart is the
Yeah.
truth. And that's fucking hard.
Yeah.
And most people don't do it. And I I understand why not. Like when I have been faced with those moments,
Totally.
I too have been like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Um, and I don't know that I always, I mean, from my own measure, I don't know that I always choose like the right. I don't always choose the truth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't
and
always
I
choose
don't
the truth.
either. I feel like the kind of like the places where my actions fall out of alignment with my values or my like feelings fall out of alignment with my values, like that is happening every single day. I'm just
Yes.
like I needed a new pillow and I ordered it from Amazon this week. And I always just think about ordering from Amazon as like the ultimate practical place where my values do not line up with my actions. And I'm like, where else do I buy a pillow? I just don't know. Anyway, so I,
Well, and we had this conversation yesterday with Becca, right? About, trying to figure
oh
out
yeah, business
what
software,
technology vendors,
right?
right? And it's like, oh, well, they're owned by, Israeli billionaires. Okay. Well, oh no, those guys, they platform fascists. It's like, fuck,
Yeah,
like where do we,
yeah, yeah. I
and
mean,
so there
yeah,
is
that like
also,
the
yeah, there's a practical, yeah.
totally,
How do you,
yeah, but
and then I think about like, how do you minimize harm,
totally.
right? What is harm reduction?
Of course, of course. Yeah, but that other, I mean, not to, I wondered if this might happen on this podcast. I was like, am I going to tell too many of my personal details here because I feel so comfortable because I'm just talking to my best friend? But I'm going to do it anyway. So,
We can edit it later if
great.
we need to.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing that you just described of like the sort of, crisis of faith and the spiritual awakening, the like willingness to sacrifice in order to do what's in alignment with your own truth, like that also has been like uh the I mean, that is just like the story of my adult relationship with my family, my like family of origin. And like the
Mm,
other kind of like giant turning point in my adulthood was like when I sort of like came out to myself as having survived abuse in my childhood and then like came out to other people about that and then attempted to sort of call that out inside my own family and the way that that was
yeah.
both received and not received, believed and not believed, and uh, and the willingness that like what the through line there for me is just like what you just described about like the willingness to sacrifice connection, relationship, belonging,
Identity. Yeah.
identity, right? In order to be true to myself, in order to hold up the things that are like, no, this is what actually happened. This is what's actually true. Um, and then that process of letting go of the idea that I had of myself before as a yoga teacher or as a person who had like a normal bad childhood and not just like
Like a pretty bad
yeah,
childhood.
right. And
Pretty painful, pretty traumatic.
yeah, and to like use the
Yep.
word abuse and to like to sort of really call out the things that happened to me as what they were. That like that has also been such a profound transformation and like absolutely a part of my like spiritual practice has been just like tending to my inner child, uh, like a forever grief practice of, you know, grieving and mourning the things that I didn't get as a kid that I needed. Like just all of those pieces. And I feel like all of those, the skills, like emotionally and spiritually, to be able to say, I'm going to leave the yoga practice are like the same skills as the skills that it takes to say, this abuse happened and I can't pretend that it didn't anymore. And it's the same skills that, that I've way less skillfully at, age 19 said, I don't want to be a Christian anymore. This
Yeah.
doesn't sit right with me. Um, but that kind of continual shedding of what doesn't fit, what isn't in alignment with who I really am, that doesn't, feel congruent with the truth. So,
Yeah. And I think like we started before we hit record, just like acknowledging the way of the world right now. And for some reason, like so what I am hearing is like one of your core spiritual principles is honoring the truth,
Yeah.
right? And all of the ways that we choose comfort over honesty, and how tempting that is, and how hard it is to sacrifice our own well-being in order to say, actually, that is incorrect. Actually, this is harm. Actually, this is cruelty. And it's, and that gets to the core of why I feel like telling these stories now is so important. Because it actually requires a tremendous fortitude in our day-to-day life to set aside our own potential safety, right? To set aside our own financial well-being, and like not to veer off into like the religion of the United States.
But we could.
I've thought so much about that since the conversation I had with Sam, like the ways that nationality take on a sort of religious quality. And one of the core tenets of that original American religion is exactly this. Right? I mean, like the story of the Revolution, it's like the story of this, the American Civil War, are stories of people saying, not only am I willing to stand up for what I believe to be true, I'm willing to die for it. Like it is like the ultimate sacrifice.
Oh man, I've been reading Eduardo Galeano for the last few weeks, who's the Latin American writer. He's from Uruguay, I think, and he's written a bunch of books about like the history of Latin America in the 20th century, and I'm reading one right now called We Say No, that's just like essays from the 60s through the 80s that he wrote. He was a journalist, but he's like a journalist poet, and so it's very kind of Joan Didion,
lyrical,
yes, exactly, and very like also like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, right? It's like magical realism, very poetic, very journalistic, beautiful stuff. But I mean, part of all these essays are just like about all the different revolutions in Latin America over the course of the 20th century, and like the people who, there's like three essays about Che Guevara, and you're just like, oh right, like this is a person who like literally just was like, okay, my whole, like I was reading about, and I was like, oh my god, like Che Guevara is like Jesus, like, like, and not in a
he is revered like Jesus in many places, and well, not just in South America, in many places, period.
Right? And then you like read this, I was like reading these essays about his life and just being like, right, like this is what it looks like to say, I will stand for what I believe. And the other thing that those essays made me think of too, and what you're saying has made me think of, is thinking about like that like none of that happens by magic. It's not just like Che Guevara was like a magical man who like by magic suddenly had this like inner fortitude. Like he like made a decision and then built skills. Right. And so like when I'm describing the kind of like the repeated process in my own life of saying, this is what's true for me and I'm willing to lose things in order to stand for that, which like I can also point to like my queerness, my like, all of my kind of political, radicalization process, like all of that has been building this skill of being willing to say, this is what I think is true and here's what I'm willing to lose for it. That like, Che Guevara didn't magically become Che Guevara. And like, I think a lot about the civil rights activists of the 1960s that like before they would do sit-ins, they literally would do trainings with each other where they would role play, and like, the like SNCC, the like Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee would like, and other organizations, right, would like, some of them would be like in chairs pretending to be doing the sit-in, and others of them would be pretending to be the horrible people who were gonna like, abuse them, and like they would like say,
yell at them, scream
totally,
at them,
and they would literally practice staying calm, practice keeping their nervous system at ease, practice staying unaffected so that they could then go and do the thing that they needed to do. And so the idea that like any of us can't do that is like, I'm like, it's just a skill, right? It's not
Yeah.
magic. It's not it's not some people are afforded this and other people are not. It's like you have to work on that. Like if you want to be a person who says I'm standing up against the things that are unjust in the world, you have to practice how to do that.
Yeah, and in the same way like that you would develop any other skill. I mean, like this is to me what practice is about. That like any other skill, like you also start with like, okay, if you want to stand up for, against what is unjust, you start with with small things, right? You know, you don't start out reading Shakespeare, you start out reading Dr. Seuss,
Right. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So like, no, starting with like these small,
Both
accessible, like
radical
where you will
writers, by the
still
way.
fair. Um, but like they both like not only, practicing the skills that you will need to have inside of those moments, but also, rehearsal, but also like practicing them small,
Totally. Totally.
which is what I think you have been doing, over the course of your life more and more.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels so spiritual to say, um, I believe in something good that is bigger than myself.
Yeah, it is. That is one of the definitions of spirituality.
Totally. I know. And I'm like,
I believe in something good that is bigger than me and that connects me to every other being. That's it.
yeah.
And there's so many things that get in the way of it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Totally. Totally.
I feel like I have to ask you about plants
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about plants.
because like when I think about, it's easy for me to name the aspects of people's spiritual life from the
Of
outside,
course.
right? But, we used to joke that you were the plant witch and I was the
Yes.
animal witch.
Totally.
So, how do plants
Yeah.
fit in here?
Okay. What a great question. Um, it's funny because like my relationship with plants has really changed since I moved to New York 3 years ago. I just see many fewer of them all the time, um, and know them less deeply than the ones that I know in Louisiana. So I guess I'll caveat that to begin with, just that like I feel like my practice has changed around that. But basically, like I always loved plants. I always, my parents, we had they put plants in the yard. We had house plants inside the house, like, um and I like knew the names of some of them or whatever, but really it was in my like mid 20s in New Orleans when Maypop Herb Shop, shout out to Maypop, um, who is they're still there, under
Yeah.
new rad indigenous ownership. Um,
Yep.
but when they first opened, it was this kind of collective punk herb shop, and they started teaching uh, herbal workshops, and I was just like, I want to know that. And so I signed up and started doing these workshops. And the first one I did, um, was with Rachel Reeves, and we went on a walk around the Marini, and we saw this giant elderberry tree that was in an empty lot that was on the corner of Franklin Avenue and Dauphine Street, maybe. And now it's not an empty lot anymore. There's a house there,
Probably with an Airbnb in it.
probably with an Airbnb in it. Yeah, it's a new construction house. Um, but we walked to this like beautiful giant elderberry tree and like learned about the medicine of elder and about what the berries do and what the flowers do and how if you eat the bark you'll shit your brains out, and so don't do that, like that like this tree is like both medicine and poison, and
And
yeah,
poison.
And then I got home and I realized that in the empty lot next to my house, there was also the same kind of tree. And that was like the beginning. I was like, oh my God, this is so magical. I can't believe this. There's this like cool tree. So I like started making medicine from this tree in the empty lot next door to my house. And then over the course of the next like 8 years, I took a ton of workshops and I did a long, like a year-long training with Jen Stovall. That was a like community herbalism training. And just like over the course of time built a relationship with the land and with the plants and with their medicines, and really learned about plants as protectors, plants as allies, plants as friends. And yeah, when I think about the kind of like yearning that I had in childhood for something stable, for something loving, that like the plants had always been there. You know, the plants had always supported me. Like I can remember relationships with specific like pine trees or magnolia trees or an azalea bush, or the sort of like plants of my childhood, and the giant oak tree in my front yard. Like these plants that um, had sheltered me, had protected me, had given me a place to be. Um, and then like through my herbal education, like learning more and more and more plants, and not in a like acquisitional knowledge kind of way, maybe a little bit of that, but like mostly it felt like expanding my community. Like it felt like I am making new
Like
friends,
meeting new
literally
friends.
like making new
Yeah.
friends. And it was suddenly like I have this like specific memory of biking home from the Bywater, and uh, I don't remember if I was going through a breakup or I was just like in a bad mental place, and I was like feeling so alone and so sad. And as I was biking, I like glanced up and there was this like pine bough kind of crossing the road. On a pine tree, but it was just like had this like super elegant shape, and I cracked up laughing because I realized I felt so alone, but I was not alone. And the plants were like,
Mm.
"Hey, you thought you were
Hey, we're
we're still
still,
here. We never
yeah.
left. We've been here all along." Like, and that feeling of like being connected to something that never goes away, that never leaves, that's like always present, that's always there. It's like, I feel like actually that when I think about a relationship with a higher power, like that's what I think about. Like, um, the natural world as my first kind of nervous system co-regulator, the natural world as my first kind of experience with God, um, and my most persistent experience with something that I would call God, because even when I forget that the plants are there, they're still there. Just because my attention goes elsewhere doesn't mean that they leave. And that's like what I was so,
Yeah.
hungry for as a teenager, was just like a consistent presence that was like consistently loving and consistently available. And I didn't have that in my family. And so it was like, oh, okay, like, is it Jesus? Is Jesus the thing that's going to give me that, um,
Right.
and, ultimately it wasn't Jesus, but it has really
That's
been
okay.
it has really been the plants. And so anyway, so I've had a practice of like making medicine. I have a beautiful apothecary in my kitchen cabinets, and I still do make medicine here sometimes, and with mostly with like plants from the farmers market rather than stuff that I've harvested myself, because it's a different kind of urban environment here. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's the plants are some of my best allies. And um, yeah, and okay, the last thing I'll say about this is just like reading Robin Wall Kimmerer, um, braiding sweetgrass, and learning about how the plants want to help us. And I think there's a very kind of like white supremacist idea, an idea wrapped up in whiteness and in capitalism, that says um, that like taking from the natural world ought to be extractive or is inherently extractive. And an
Yeah.
indigenous perspective, at least presented by Kimmerer, um, is that like the plants actually want to be in relationship with us. It is like biologically beneficial to them to be in relationship with human beings, because we are part of biology, we are part of nature, we are part of the ecosystem. And so that's also been a big kind of unlearning for me in my relationship with plants.
I remember you also telling me a story when you were doing your herbalism training about the ways that the landscape subtly changed after Katrina,
Yeah.
and that the plants that are, was it nettles? Was it something
Skull
else
cap.
that's like
Yes.
skullcap that is a nervous system regulator, helpful for anxiety, started growing in massive,
Quantities all over New Orleans. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. This is a story I
Right.
learned from Jen, my herbal teacher, Scutellaria brasiliensis, the like one of the species of skullcap that grows really prolifically in New Orleans, like didn't really grow there that much before Katrina, and then Katrina changed the landscape both like in a biological way and in a spiritual way. So the plants like
Yeah.
came to answer the call essentially.
Yeah. I still think, I think about that now every time yeah, all the things. I think about that often, and that sometimes we don't, it's so easy to take for granted either the things that we don't know enough about to understand, right? Like, I am not an herbalist. I just learn stuff from smart people like you. Um, how much of the connection that is available to us that we take for
Yeah.
granted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that story is running through every spiritual tradition I know. It's like it's here. Like, you know, God's sitting in the corner going, whenever you're ready, I'm just,
Yeah.
hi.
I,
Like, I'm
yeah.
here. I'm here when you're
That's like
ready.
half of all the Rumi poems ever written are like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. And it's
Exactly.
interesting too. Like I have felt really, this is like getting into the like business end of things, but it has always felt really important to me not for any, I'm not saying this about anyone else's stuff, but for me, it's been really important to keep plants as like a monetized part of my life and to just have a relationship with the plants and with the medicine um, that is outside of commerce, that is outside of trying to uh, buy and sell. I mean, I buy stuff, but like that, I'm not trying to sell it. I'm not trying to get people to buy things, and so it's been a real beautiful kind of practice of other kinds of exchange to like make medicine and then give it away. Um, and also like to be able to make medicine from plants that people have given me. I mean, I still have um, a bottle of, rose elixir from roses from your front yard, and like have given that out
Yeah.
to tons of people. I have medicine, I have yarrow tincture from my grandmother's yard. I have earth smoke from a neighbor's yard in mid city in New Orleans, just like all these different specific moments where people have been very generous in sharing the plants of their land with me and then been able to make medicine from that then I get to give out to other people too, which feels really special to just be like, yeah, it's here, it's abundant, it's like, and it's not for sale.
It's here, it's abundant, and we're all
Yeah,
connected, right? It's like this reminder of the connectedness.
totally.
In your everyday life now, is there a practice that feels spiritual that is helping you stay grounded and connected?
Okay. I thought about this question a lot because I don't have any formal practices at this juncture. I like don't have anything that I do in a kind of formal way or that they don't.
Sorry, that's the smile I have, is like, it's the answer that so many people
I
give,
know.
and then they tell me all of the things that they're doing that are spiritual practices. So
Well,
that it's the other reason this podcast feels so
yeah.
important, is because people are like, well, if I'm not meditating for 20 minutes sitting still with my eyes
Right.
closed, I'm not, there's no
Yeah.
spiritual practice.
No, I mean, I think the thing that I am doing formally is trying to like continually unlearn that kind of stuff that you just described, like continually letting it get messier and more watery and more kind of just like um, ad hoc and uh, piecemeal, and knowing that that's not wrong or bad. That's just it just is, and kind of letting go of the desire for a more kind of formal container as somehow like indicative of my goodness.
Preach.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the stuff, the like, I thought of two things when I was thinking about the answer to this question. Okay, that's not true. There's like 100 things, but one of them is like going on walks. I like go on walks as part of my spiritual practice. It's like, my stupid little mental health walks, as the internet calls them, but like it really feels like just leaving the house for any amount of time is so conducive to reminding me I am not and I am an individual, but I am not alone. Like, I live in a community surrounded by many other, I mean, especially in New York, by many other people. Um, and the plants are always here. The sky is always here. It's like the moon is always there, whether I can see it or not. Like, those kinds of things. So going on walks. Um, Cooking honestly feels like spiritual practice to me. Um, and uh,
It's
It
alchemy.
definitely feels like alchemy, yeah. And it really, I like to joke that like chopping vegetables is my happy place, but it really is kind of true that like, I just love to chop an onion. Like, just give me a cutting board and a good knife and a, pile of vegetables that need to be diced. Like, I'm so happy there. Um,
I'm so glad that I know, like you could do
I
all the
know, yeah.
things.
It's not for everybody, but it's for me. Um, yeah, and honestly, I feel like my romantic relationship is a real side of spiritual practice for me. I'm in like a healthy, happy, long-term relationship for the first time ever in my life, and it's like so profound and deeply healing, and also like hilarious and frustrating and all the things. But the kind of commitment to myself that requires, the commitment to this other person that requires, and the commitment to the container of the two of us that it requires is really I mean, I feel like people talk about like having children like this, but like I feel like it has like really made me grow into the person that I really want to be. It has like over and over again um both invited and demanded that I step into a new version of myself. And sometimes I do that willingly and gracefully, and sometimes I do it with, a lot of anguish. But that has been a real beautiful spiritual practice. And hilariously, to me, and perhaps to you also, Vera, I feel like working out has been kind of a spiritual practice for me lately.
I love that.
I
I love
know. I
it.
mean, yeah, with the
I
people,
I
yeah.
think being in our bodies is somewhere. Actually, I know exactly when it happened. I mean, I don't know exactly when it happened, but one of the ways that it happened was when I think it's when Da Vinci started studying
Mm,
anatomy. The church said, "You can study the body, but leave the soul to
mm,
us." And so we separated the body and the
yeah.
spirit. And so and I feel like we're slowly reintegrating in so many places. I think medicine is slowly reintegrating and no longer saying like this is a mental illness, this is a physical
Right.
illness. It's like there is illness that has symptoms in many different parts of our
Yeah.
lives. Um, and that being in our body is yeah. I mean, there's a reason I think that yoga asana practice is so
Yeah.
compelling to so many
So
people.
profound for sure, because we don't have a lot of other channels for that. It's like, what are the other places you're allowed to be in your body? Like sports, exercise, sex. Like, there's not a lot of,
Sex.
yeah, food a little bit. There's like not that many places
Yeah.
where you can actually be in your body, and to have a place that explicitly acknowledges that being in the body is spiritual, I think is really compelling. That's like, I mean, that's why I was a yoga teacher for all that time.
Yeah.
So,
And it makes me think about one of the things that you did to create a container that I think of as a deeply spiritual practice during the pandemic,
yeah.
which is you co founded
Yeah,
Distancing,
social distancing.
right?
Punniest, cutest name thing ever.
Right? But that like is dancing doesn't make any
No,
sense.
none.
It is the weirdest. Like it is so bizarre. It is not. I mean, certainly some people, allow it to become some kind of commerce or like spiritual expression, but it's one of the only art forms that I think regular people engage
Mm,
in a right in an average sort of everyday
yeah.
way, and it's Yeah. And it is just pure affirmation that, like, I have a body,
Yep. Here it
right?
is.
There's
Yeah.
music, you know. I can move it.
Yeah.
I can be moved
Yeah. Totally.
in a way.
Yes. There's a quote that's like, the church says the body is a sin, science says the body is a problem, the body says I am a fiesta. I'll
Yes.
find the like whole quote. I think there's like one more line in that, but
Yes.
that always makes me giggle because that is what the body says. The body's like, you know,
Yeah, like there's so much, the entire range, I think, of
yeah,
existence we can only have, right? Because of the meat suit.
totally. Yeah. I mean, social distancing was so special. That was like a kind of impromptu online dance party that we started right at the beginning, like March 14th, 2020 was the first one. And then um, we like, we were like, okay, we're doing this on Saturday. Okay, I guess we'll do it again next Saturday. And then in those like long first days of the very beginning of lockdown, we were like, Saturday is an eternity from now. So on Monday, we were like, let's do it again on Wednesday. And so then every Wednesday and Saturday for like the first 15 months of the pandemic, we gathered on Zoom and danced together. And those early ones were like 100 people dancing because, you know, everybody was freaking out and stuck
Stuck at
inside.
home with nothing
And
to,
yeah.
yeah.
But then there developed a really sweet, very consistent community of people who like came together to let other people watch them dance alone in their living room or their kitchen or their back patio or whatever. And yeah, just all our little rectangles on the Zoom screen doing our wiggles for an hour twice a week, and it was really special. Real relationships, real friendships formed out of that, and um, yeah, a real connection that I don't think would have happened in the same way if it had been like knitting club or like I don't know what, like some other, I mean, I guess knitting is sort of physical, but like something
Sort of,
less somatic.
or getting together and just like sitting on Zoom and talking
Right.
about what's
Yeah.
happening.
It would have been
It's like nobody wanted, nobody, we
yeah.
just,
Yeah.
what a gift that
It
was.
was a special place. So, and if there are people still you know, for whatever variety of reasons still doing you know, exercising COVID isolation or who just want to hang out online. It still happens. So but it's not twice a week anymore. But you can still go and dance with people on Zoom if you want to.
That's so
Yeah, it's nice. And
fun.
it's like held by the community in a very kind of 12-step way where it's like each meeting is
Yeah, very
exactly
egalitarian,
whoever wants to
yeah.
host is hosting. Yeah. So it's special.
Do you have any other thoughts before we close?
I mean, of course I do. I have 1,000 thoughts always. The other like bullet points that are rattling around in my brain are like thinking about spiritual practice and thinking about undoing patriarchy, which like maybe this is like a conversation for you and me to have off this podcast, or maybe there's an episode 2 where we talk about
Yeah, I think we
the
have
men.
another episode.
Yeah, but that
Yeah.
I feel like the spiritual practice of building emotional skills, the spiritual practice of building spiritual fortitude as part of a practice of undoing supremacy culture, whether that's patriarchy, white supremacy, whatever else, feels really alive in my brain right now. Um, yeah, and just like thinking about this moment in time that we're in the United States and this kind of like slow and fast collapsing that is happening,
Yeah.
and sort of what is required of each of us in this moment in time, and how do we find the fortitude to to meet this moment, and like yeah, I don't know, I'm thinking about like our neighborhood mutual aid group, the way we're like connected to the people who live on our block, like all the kind of small scale things that I'm trying to hold up and really prioritize in my life right now as, like you said, you know, the Dr. Seuss versions of skill building for yeah, for fighting fascism on a larger scale. I don't know, like that's
Yeah.
not really a closing thought um, per se, but
No,
that's
that's
a
a
opening a whole other can
that's
of
a
worms thought. But
no, that's a to be
right,
continued.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's funny to think about how the I don't really think of myself as being like a deeply spiritual person. I don't really think of myself as having like a particularly evolved spiritual perspective or spiritual practice. Um, and yet, like everything in my life is oriented around like trying to, um, yeah, trying to tell the truth, trying to uh, be uh, in better relationship with myself and the world around me. Um, and yeah, I guess there is something kind of inherently spiritual about that.
Yeah, and being, as you said, like being connected to something bigger than us that is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I don't, I like, I think the thing that I really connect to is like the belief in the possibility of a better future. Like that might be my higher power, you know, which like I didn't make that up. That's like all the activists who, all the, that's like that's a James Baldwin, that's a Bell Hooks, that's a, everyone else who has come
Yeah.
before who has said, the way we're doing things kind of sucks and we don't believe that it has to be this way, you know.
Yeah. But I also think there's something really, at the very least, we have to have both hope that things could be better and also faith. For whatever reason, I'm going back to the metaphor of the cathedral
Mm,
builders, right? That like all of those beautiful Gothic cathedrals took hundreds of years to
right.
build, right? So if you were a stonemason or a master glazer or whatever, you spent your entire
Yeah.
life and like sacrificed your body and your hands carving and doing all of this stuff to never see the masterpiece complete.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that's faith in action.
Totally. Totally. And I think I hold that, and I also hold the sort of, the urgency of the moment, right? And the sort of insistence, and this is like stuff I've learned from other organizers, from other, like Song, Southerners on New Ground, especially like has uh, promoted this idea of like queer liberation in our lifetime. And I'm like, yes, like we both can be. So I'm like holding the paradox of like both being committed to a lifetime's worth of work that I may not see all the fruits of, and also holding the possibility,
That you get to see some of
yeah,
them.
holding the possibility that like we're co-creating liberation all the time in every moment that we can. Um, and that it is possible that the world will be dramatically different, before I leave this physical plane. So
Hopefully for the better.
yes, dramatically different in a good way. I mean,
In a good
certainly it's
way.
going to be dramatically different somehow, but I am holding the possibility that it could be dramatically different in a good way.
Yeah. And I think that's harder,
Yeah,
honestly.
totally.
For me, it's so much harder to sit with the possibility that it could get better
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
and to continue to actively work
right. I forget who
for it
says
to get
like
better.
cynicism is an overstatement of certainty, right? It's like when you're cynical, you're like you're too sure that you know what the future holds, and like, yeah, I don't know what the future holds. Shit, like I don't even know I don't know what I'm doing in my like daily life. Like I don't know anything. Like I certainly don't know that like everything is fucked and it's not ever gonna get better. Like how could I possibly know that,
Yeah.
So
How could we possibly?
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you. Thanks for tuning in, Curious Hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time,
please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.